All right, breaking news just into the newsroom. President-elect Trump's sentencing in that hush money case in New York has been canceled indefinitely. This is now coming to us from the judge, Judge Juan Merchan, who is now saying that this case has been canceled indefinitely. You'll recall that this was the sentencing on the conviction charges related to the hush money that he allegedly paid to a porn star. That porn star, Stormy Daniels. And this is all based on the judge's decision to toss the case entirely, most likely, I'm speculating now, due to Donald Trump's election win. He is now the president-elect of the United States. And there was some reporting earlier this week that Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney, would not oppose the president-elect's bid to freeze sentencing, while the latest attempt to get that sentencing on the books was hashed out. Sorry, did you say we had? All right. Talking in my ear. So here's the deals, folks. The judge now is saying that this decision has been canceled indefinitely, and we will not get a decision or a sentencing on the president-elect for this hush money case. Now, again, this was all stemming back to the allegations that the former president had paid money to Stormy Daniels. He was convicted, Donald Trump was, on 34 counts for falsifying business records in that historic case. He was found guilty by 12 jury members of his peer, 12 Manhattanites, and this was an unprecedented criminal prosecution of an ex-president. This happened after only 12 hours of deliberation. Jury members of the jury found the president guilty on all those counts before. And if you recall, we were showing that right here on CBS News 24/7. The word guilty was repeated some 33 times on live television. The President-elect was sitting there, as you see in this image that we're showing you right now, slouched in his seat, shoulders forward, tilting his head, looking at each of the jurors, those 7 men and 5 women, as they confirmed his fate. And that is where we were. President afterwards said to reporters that he was fighting for a country, fighting for the Constitution, called it a nation in decline. There was reaction from both sides of the aisle. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called it the rule of law, which applies to everyone, including a former president of the United States. But then you had House GOP members such as Elise Stefanik of New York, who blasted the decision back then, saying that it showed how corrupt and rigged the American justice system had become. So that was where we were. And now, of course, the news coming into the CBS newsroom that Judge Juan Merchan says that the hush money trial sentencing has been put on hold indefinitely. And so that is where we're standing by to get some reporting from one of our correspondents who may be on the scene for us. What are we hearing on that, Eric? All right. Again, if you're just joining us now, Manhattan, the judge in the Donald Trump hush money sentencing trial has decided to put this sentencing that was supposed to happen on November 26th. He has decided to put that on hold indefinitely. That sentencing, which was scheduled for November 26th, had already been postponed several times. And now we are hearing that it is postponed indefinitely. All right, Jessica Levinson is joining me now to talk about this. Jessica, what's your reaction?
Vlad, can you hear me?
I can.
So my reaction is that this makes sense. We are in a situation where this is the first in the nation case where we have a former president who's a convicted felon and who's then re-elected to be in the Oval Office again. And we don't have a roadmap for this. There's no legal guidebook. So what we have is a situation where I think it makes all the sense in the world for the judge to say, let's push pause. Maybe there will be a sentencing after the term, but I think all of the legal and constitutional questions related to imposing a sentence before President Trump once again becomes the occupant of the Oval Office was just too high. Those thresholds were too high at this point.
Yeah, and describe a little bit more of what you mean by those thresholds, Jessica, because again, for our audience who's just joining us now, as we are nearing the bottom of the hour, the New York judge Juan Merchan has delayed indefinitely the sentencing in President-elect Donald Trump's hush money case, which you recall was the conviction that the president experienced back in May for 34 criminal counts of falsifying business records stemming from those payments he made to that porn star, Stormy Daniels. And so those convictions stand, Jessica. He is still a convicted criminal, but no sentence will be imposed, I guess.
It looks like no sentence will be imposed. So you asked me a great question about the legal issues here. So what we're looking at is a situation where we're about to have the head of one of the federal branches, the head of the executive branch, potentially face a criminal sentence. And even though this isn't a separation of powers question, it's a question about levels of government. And I promise we're not going to get too wonky here, except to say when it comes to the state continuing with a criminal case, and in this case, imposing a sentence, I think the argument that the Trump team would make, legally speaking, is it invades the executive's power and constitutional duties. Under the Constitution, the president has the duty to take care to faithfully execute the laws and to have imposed a sentence. Now, I think there's an argument that you could impose a sentence and it could be legal, but I think what the judge is saying here is I'm not going to be the first in the nation because it would raise questions about the state's power over the federal executive branch.
So I'm just looking at this order from Judge Merchan, and it's so interesting. Obviously, Jessica, in the news business, we're often asked to keep talking while we break down what is happening. And in fact, when I look at this this brief from Judge Merchan, it's literally just a couple of sentences. It doesn't even give details in the way that you are as to why he's making this decision. We're left to surmise and to speculate that it is, in fact, because the executive, the president, the leader of the free world, would not be able to execute his actions as president of the United States if he were sentenced in this conviction. But is that surprising to you that it's just a one-pager?
It's not. So when it comes to judicial opinions, I mean, you and I get to talk about big Supreme Court decisions, and I think we're used to pages and pages and we have to go through, or even for some of these state criminal cases. I mean, you and I have talked about decisions out of Georgia and obviously this case in New York, the civil case in New York, and typically we see a little bit more explanation, but that's not required. All that's required is a judge to say thumbs up or thumbs down. And I suspect that there are reasons why the judge simply didn't want to get into all of the reasons. Again, this is a situation where we've put Judge Merchan as the first judge in the nation to have to confront this situation. So let's look at history for a moment. We have had President Clinton face a civil case, and a judge said it's okay for that civil case that Paula Jones brought against President Clinton for alleged sexual harassment before President Clinton was in office. It's okay for that to go forward. But then we have other cases that talk about the idea that presidents are immune from criminal cases, immune from civil liability for official acts. And they all talk about this protective bubble that we need to put around the president and the presidency. And I suspect that it just wasn't worth it for Judge Merchan to go down all of these new roads and to be the first judge to have to plow these new paths and say, here's what I'm thinking, and here's why I think it doesn't make sense. Because frankly, part of this is legal, but part of this is a judge just exercising his discretion to say, I don't think it makes sense to impose the sentence now. And let's, again, push pause or stop.
Jessica, just stand by. Let's bring in Graham Cates. Graham, just take us through how we got here to this moment.
Sure. So, listen, this is the third time that sentencing has been delayed in this case. You'll recall it was originally scheduled for July, and that's because President-elect Trump was convicted at the end of May. And the first postponement of sentencing happened because the Supreme Court released its landmark ruling that the presidents or former presidents have immunity for their official acts And Trump's defense said that it was going to, and it indeed did, file a motion to dismiss, arguing that during President-elect Trump's trial, there were witness testimony and evidence that reflected official acts. And of course, prosecutors said, this was a sliver of a mountain of evidence if, in fact, any of it violated that ruling. And they said they didn't believe it did. And so the judge delayed the first effort at sentencing so that those two sides could put out their arguments and the motion. And then in the interim, Trump's team filed another motion to delay sentencing, saying that the new sentencing date, which was in September, was too close to the presidential election. And there was not really a legal argument here as much as you don't want to interfere with the presidential election argument. And the judge agreed. He said that he didn't want to be accused of having any sort of bias or agenda in whatever his sentence was going to be. So he pushed back the sentencing to what was supposed to be this coming Tuesday, November 26th. And then after Trump won the election, his defense said, this not only should there not be sentencing, but this entire case should be dismissed because he won the election. That, in fact, even as president-elect, it would be unconstitutional to do anything to distract him from the demands of the office. And prosecutors themselves agreed. They said it's okay to delay it while we figure this out. But they did say that they are opposed to dismissing the case outright. They said there should be a balance between the constitutional concerns, the demands of the presidency and the president-elect, and the will of the jurors who unanimously found him guilty of 34 felonies when he was a civilian, when he wasn't the president-elect. And they implied that they're going to argue there's nothing in the law that says you should dismiss a criminal case already decided because someone's elected to the presidency.
Right. Jessica, so just again, just sort of for the folks who are joining us now who are expecting coverage from our San Francisco station, the official ruling now from Judge Juan Merchan in New York is that the president-elect's sentencing on those 34 counts related to that hush money sentencing in the Stormy Daniels case is now canceled indefinitely. But I just want to make sure that I'm reading, because I'm not a lawyer, but you are. It does appear that the judge isn't allowing reply briefs from either side. The stay is granted pending filings of a motion for dismissal. But could he still sentence the president-elect before January 20th, or is this really done and over?
So you are looking at something that I don't have access to right now, but I will say based on what you described, it's not done and over, in that you can, as a judge, take something off of calendar and you can put it back on calendar. So in this case, there is going to be more motion practice about a motion to dismiss, as you said. And then the question for the judge is really, one, first about substance. Does the entire case go away because either of the immunity decision, I think that's not the case, or because we have a criminal convict here, somebody who is convicted of crimes, who's now going to be the president of the United States again. So are either of those legal grounds to say this case goes away? Then we have another tract here, which is looking at sentencing. And the question becomes, if the case holds, if there isn't a motion to dismiss that's successful, then when, if ever, does the sentencing occur? And it looks like that's what we're talking about right now, which is the sentencing isn't going to happen, at the very least, until we figure out what, if anything, will happen before January 20th on those two substantive decisions. And again, just to clarify again, we're doing breaking news, trying to be as clear as possible. The judge has not issued a decision about what happens in this case as a result of the Supreme Court's immunity decision, which again says that presidents and former presidents have immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts. I think that does not affect this case. I do not think we're talking about official acts. Second, we have motions to dismiss, meaning this case should go away, based on the idea that we're talking about somebody who is just elected to be the next president. And so for reasons that are a bit amorphous, but are certainly grounded in constitutional principles. This case should go away, period. And then finally, we have, if the cases stay, when, if ever, do we impose a sentence? So all of those things are up in the air. I know I gave you a very long answer, but the answer is the judge can put this back on calendar. We could have a sentence. If there's a sentence before January 20th, let's be clear, I really don't think it will be jail time.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, Jessica Levinson. Thank you very much, as always, for jumping in at the very last minute with the breaking news. Graham Cates as well, who's been covering this trial and the sentencing from the very, very beginning. Again, if you're just joining us now, New York Judge Juan Merchan has delayed sentencing indefinitely in President-elect Donald Trump's hush money case and has granted the president-elect permission to file a motion to dismiss the case. So that is where we are right now, but I'm going to toss it over to Elizabeth Cook, who's live from San Francisco with all the breaking news. This is CBS News 24/7.